Hello everybody and welcome back to Wild Trim. This is the third video in the series we're calling Basics, and in this video we are looking at gymnastics. We've got three main types that we're interested in. Awkward silence. Mechanical. What is mechanical filtration? It is the physical removal, the straining of visible debris in your water column. So if you've got things, particulate matter, in your water column that you can see, if you can get that into your filter, it will physically remove it. Whether it's a gauze, a membrane, or even just a sponge. As long as it stops those particles re-entering your tank, that is mechanical filtration. The next one. Biological. Most people think this is the big one, but as we discovered in the first video, if you're not into the nitrogen cycle, you don't want to take part in that, you don't need to keep fish. So this isn't a necessity, but it is what happens in the video before this one, which was the nitrogen cycle. If you want a better understanding of biological filtration, as easy as I can break it down visually, go back to video number 2 and have a look at that one. So biological filtration is living organisms, the chemoautotrophs, dealing with the ammonia, oxidize it basically. They oxidize ammonia and take it from ammonia through nitrite into nitrate, making it far drastically less toxic the further down the chain you go. The next one is chemical. What is chemical filtration? Chemical is actually a lot bigger than people think. Chemical filtration is often just, oh yeah, that's your carbon. There's a lot more to it than that now with the development of man-made resins. A resin is a man-made compound that can be designed to absorb or trap or bind to organic or inorganic compounds. It's witchcraft. You put these little plastic looking beads in or powder in a little tea bag, stuff happens, you can't see it. So it is sorting things out in your water column that your biological filtration cannot do. So you can bind ammonia. Okay, your biological filtration can deal with that. But your biological filtration can't deal with tannins. It can't remove medicines. Chemical filtration can do these things. This is one of the ways, like we spoke about in the video before, the nitrogen cycle video, that you can remove nitrate without doing a water change, without using live plants. There are resins that can deal with that. It's not always the best method, and we'll get into that as we get on. So mechanical filtration, really we're just looking at sponges, foams, call it what you want. That is 99% of mechanical filtration in this hobby. Now, what do we need to know about mechanical filtration and sponges? Sponges are graded. You will see them graded from fine to large, XL, extra fine. These are meaningless. But the standard is PPI. No, they're not trying to get you to go to court and get some money back. This stands for pores per inch. So a square inch of surface area, how many holes or pores are in it? Typical range is 15 to 50 through 25 and 35. Now 15 is the extra large hole size, and 50 is super fine. 50 will clog way faster than 15. However, 50 also has the largest surface area. 15 has bigger gaps, bigger holes, and therefore less surface area. Now this, why do you care? If your water is crystal clear and mechanical filtration is not something you need from this sponge, in that stage of your filtration, 50 can, as long as your water is clear by the time it reaches it, offer you more surface area for biological filtration purposes. So even though people think of sponges as mechanical filtration, they are also biological and can be used primarily for biological filtration. So why would you use 15? 15 is great. 15 and 25, that's where I am. I've got sponge filters that run 50. Cool, that's what they come with. Don't have a lot of options with that. But 15 and 25 is great. 15, you shouldn't have any giant particles that are being trapped in 15 because that is some big stuff. But 25 can really filter out some larger stuff. It's not going to make your water crystal clear, but you can deal with that later on in your system. 15 and 25 do not inhibit flow at all. They've got the least amount of flow inhibition, allowing the water to flow through your filter and get the most turnover per hour, which is another thing that you'll hear about with when people talk about filters. Oh, you need to turn your tank over 6 times in an hour, 10 times in an hour. Everyone's got their preference. There is no standard on it. It all depends on what you're keeping and what you want your water to look like. Props! Okay, so an example of 15 ppi. You see those fairly large holes, okay? You can see through it. An example of 35 ppi. You see on the edge sort of what you're looking at, pore size. And an example of 50 ppi. Now we sell these at events because these are very, very customizable. They're cheap and you can adapt, modify a lot of filters with this sort of stuff. So there's your 50, your 35, and your 15. And this stuff has got a lot more uses in the hobby than just filtration. I love 15. I've got a lot of that hanging around. So as well as foam actually being great to buy in sheets and modify the filtration to how you want it, you can also modify the foam itself. And the reason I bring this up is because I've seen it too many times. People don't realize they've modified the foam. That sounds silly because it's obvious to a lot of people, but apparently it is also not obvious to a lot of people. This is 35. This is 15 because it's the amount of holes over a square inch. Now, if you cram more of any given foam into that given area, you increase the number. So you can take 15 all the way to 50 if you want. How? You compress it. Notice how the holes get smaller? We can cram another layer in, and another layer, and another layer, and another layer. Now that is a pretty fine foam, much finer than 15 ppi. So I see quite often people saying, oh, well, I've gone for 25 ppi. Why is my filter still clogging? Well, because you've rammed 4 acres of it into a hang-on back. That's why it's now 1,000,000 ppi. Air can't get through that. You know, you've created a hermetically sealed hang-on back. So, which one do you want? Well, why have you got to have just one? I like 25 and 15. I really do. 35, I also quite like because it's quite fine. And if you don't have a particularly messy tank, it's very good at getting water clarity. However, there's no reason to just have one. You can have as many different grades as you like, and you can stack them. And this is often the most efficient way to make use of the space available to you inside a filter, be it a hang-on back, a canister, whatever you like. So, stacking them. What does this let us do? If the water is flowing from top to bottom, this is allowing us to catch large particles without restricting flow. It's letting the smaller particles through, which are then caught by 35 ppi. With restriction on flow a little bit more, but not as much as 50. So it's letting a little bit more through. Now you can stop there if you want, and that's two-stage filtration. Move on to 50, and you're collecting large, semi-large, small particles. You should have some pretty clear water coming out. Now, obviously, this clogs faster. So if you do it this way round, the first thing that's going to clog up is this. It's going to catch all the small particles, and then all of this isn't going to be useful for mechanical filtration because it's all being caught up here. Large, small, medium-sized stuff, all being caught at the top. But what this is still useful for, because it's not useless, is biological filtration. So the most important thing to remember about biological filtration is that every surface grows bacteria. Everyone. So this might be useless for mechanical filtration, but it still works for biological. However, it is still better, or it is still more space efficient to run it this way around, because it's all being used as mechanical and it's all being used as biological. However, should a large piece of debris come along and lie itself flat on here, there is going to be no more flow through that area, which will render a lot of this underneath. It will flow around, but in a sort of a V shape, useless. It will no longer be able to catch particles, so it's no good for mechanical filtration. And if it is so bad that no oxygen in the water is getting to it, the bacteria will die off as well, because that's what they need, oxygen. Okay, I want crystal clear water. Well, there's an option. If 50 ppi doesn't get your system crystal enough for you, your next best bet is this stuff. Now, they call this filter floss, filter wool, acrylic wool. It's basically like teddy bear stuffing. And a lot of people do use, just the wadding. Like this is essentially what we used to use in subwoofer enclosures when we built custom subwoofer enclosures, because it absorbs reverberation. And it's super fine. You're not seeing through that. For water clarity, this stuff is fantastic. For the price, unbeatable. Carbon will, because it has fantastically small pore sizes, actually do some mechanical filtration as well. But activated carbon is really firmly in the chemical section. So this stuff, advantages, very, very fine catching capability. Disadvantage, clogs incredibly fast. Now in our cross section, there is always an argument. Most people can agree that this is the most efficient for both mechanical and biological filtration. This way round. Water running from the top into 15, through a medium, and then into a 50. If you're running all three sizes, that's the most efficient way. Until it comes to filter floss, and people will argue to the grave about it, where would you put your super fine filter? Top, where the water first comes in, or bottom? There's an argument for both, and it does depend on the type of filtration you have, and by that I mean the actual device. Hang on back, sump, canister, blah blah blah. And even that is not definitive, because different canisters will flow in different ways. They may flow from bottom to top, or top to bottom, or bottom to top to bottom to top. You need to know your filter, but that's something we'll touch on when we get to canister filters. So In my mind, when we are looking at pure filtration, mechanical filtration, obviously, like we spoke about before, this is the way to go. It's the most efficient for biological and mechanical filtration. Okay? So you're catching the big stuff, the smaller stuff, the really small stuff, and then the really, really small stuff. Wicked. Because obviously, stuck. If we put it on the top, like we just spoke about with having our stack up the other way, with the finest stuff on the top, it's just going to clog really fast. Whereas if we have it underneath, it'll clog, might take 2, 3, 4 times as long to clog because we filtered out the big stuff before it got to the Santa beard. Oh, yeah, no, I want it to go through that one first. Okay, yeah, I'm with you. Get your water as finely filtered as possible, as fast as you can. Now, there's a thought process behind that, and that is it's already done, smaller space taken up as possible, and then everything else is free for more space for biological filtration that cannot be hampered by a big piece of debris coming on it. Okay? But then there's really no need to have these two. You may as well go from this to this because, like we discussed, this has the most surface area. It can, if not clogged, which it won't be if the water's come through this, it has the most surface area and most biological filtration potential. The most surface area to house the most bacteria. The problem with that is, this is going to clog first. It's the only thing that's going to clog, which means you need to maintain it more often. I've got tanks that will clog this in an hour because they've got wood-eating plecos in there. And they create sawdust. Something fierce. The only time I would ever run this on the top is in an easy access situation. And by that I mean you take the lid off and it's there. Both out, new piece in, lid back on. A hang-on back that runs from top to bottom. Excellent. Most hang-on backs run from bottom to top. Not great. Not great for that. If you're going to run that in a hang-on back, you might as well run only that. And then if you're having to throw it away because it clogs up, it's not doing a lot for biological filtration, which is fine if you're only using your hang-on back for water clarity, which is totally legit. People do that. People run different types of filtration. I am looking at one of my tanks now that is running 2 different types of sponge filters and a horrendous hang-on back from Superfish. I'm not going to hide it. So hopefully we all understand the basics of mechanical filtration. So biological filtration. This is a nightmare. So biomedia. This really ticks me off because you'll get hardcore believers and they will be singing the same song as the I don't have a clue, but I'm going to preach like I know it all. And they're really hard to argue against because they are fanatics. So what is biomedia? Well, as we've already discussed, sponge, biomedia. These things are biomedia. Hell, even that is biomedia. Yeah, that's my dirty sock. And this is the thing. Everything is biomedia. So you end up on these Facebook groups and everyone's excited and yes, cool, I understand. I was exactly the same. Oh, I want this filter, it's cool. You don't really need it. You'll find that out 5 years later. But it's cool. I like it for whatever reason. Maybe I like the brand. I've got brand loyalty. Anything. Everything is biological filtration. Because the key point, ladies and jelly spoons, is that beneficial denitrifying bacteria grows on every hard surface in that tank. It'll even grow on your plants. you're running sand, your sand substrate for the first centimeter down, that is one hell of a surface area. The amount of bacteria that can hold is huge, absolutely huge. And you'll get one of these either hardcore fanatics or a know nothing telling you, you must go and buy Seachem Matrix. Now, Seachem Matrix is a good quality product. But just to prove a point, it comes across like this crazy engineer. It's pumice stone. Go and buy a bag of pumice stone from somewhere, save yourself £500,000. Just do that. Now, Seachem Matrix. There's nothing wrong with it. I like Seachem Matrix. I, in fact, have bought it in the past just to see what it was like to have in my hand. Seachem Matrix claims to have around 700 meters squared of surface area for every 2 liters. Now, it's difficult because it's pumice stone, they're so light, they give everything in volume rather than weight. So it's actually hard to make a comparison. But half a litre will do an enormous tank, apparently. Now bear that in mind, half a litre. This stuff is not 2-dimensional, it's 3-dimensional, which means it has an outer surface, pores with surface area leading to a core. It's a natural product. The way they test for surface area is not a good test. Because what they do is they crush a piece of this pumice stone and then they calculate using wizardry and intelligence how much surface area is there. Now, imagine this is a cross section of your piece of Seachem Matrix. It's normally machined into stupid like diamond type shapes, but if this is a cross section, here is one of your microscopic pores. So the surface area here is more than the surface area if that was just a straight ball, right? And that's the principle it works on. It's full of these tiny microscopic little holes. But when they crush it, they expose pores that would not otherwise be exposed. So for every pore, every hole in this natural structure that is not exposed to the outside, and therefore does not have good oxygen exchange, every one of these counts towards their surface score because they crush it and they can't tell you if that was inside and had access to the outside or not. They got no idea. So they crush it and it basically gives you a reading of what that dust, the surface area that the dust that the pumice stone is made of has. Not like this. Because all of these surface areas are calculated, but to me and you, not a lot of good. Not a lot of good. And the problem with porous structures like this is that this pore is great. It's got all this bacteria living on it, And then along comes a piece of shite. Just a big piece of debris. And that ruins it all because it goes, you've done your bit of mechanical filtration, you've caught that piece of debris, and now you're starving this bacteria of oxygen. And then all this is just the same as one of these. It's no good. So if you're going to run ceramic media or this high-tech stuff, sintered glass is usually what it is, like Eheims or that ridiculous stuff. Biohome doesn't work. Ultimate. You really need your water to be completely debris-free before it reaches that point. And unless your canister filter, which is where you're generally going to run ceramic media, is generally a canister filter, it's pointless running on one of these little internal cans. But we'll get to that when we get to those in later videos. The only really way is to run this stuff. Now, unless you want to be opening your canister every week, you don't want to run this stuff. You just don't. So now you're compromising. You're going through a selection of 35 and then down to 50. Sorry, this has got the filter flush stuck to it. but this isn't catching as much as the white stuff could have. So given enough time, given a lazy enough fish keeper, eventually you get enough sludge through that it really does block up your ceramic media. So if you're really hell-bent on using these ceramic medias, order's got to be pretty clear, or your maintenance of the sponges has to be good. More regular than if you weren't running ceramic media, in all honesty. Now, argument between Seachem matrix types, and by that, I'm using them as an example. I am a Seachem fanboy, not going to lie. Straight up, love their branding. And that's probably it, actually. I love Prime. Prime works very well for me. And so do a lot of other products that they've got. Now, I haven't got any matrix on me because it's in a 307 upstairs, the small bit that I bought to test. But it is a solid structure. That is to say that it is a porous ball. It is a ball. That is your normal ceramic ring. This is actually a fluval ceramic ring. And it's quite a quality ceramic ring, because if you want to go on AliExpress, sorry, I've been changing oil on the car. You know that bit that if you do your own car maintenance, you'll know there's only so much oil you can get out of your fingerprints. If you go on AliExpress or Temu or one of these other cheap discount sites, you'll see these and you think, oh wow, they're crazy cheap, but they're not all created equal. You can see the pores on these, right? Some of those are damn near smooth. I mean, on a microscopic level, they're not. And with your biological bacteria being around 1 micron, so 1,000 of them end to end in a millimeter, they're tiny. Nothing is smooth to them. Glass isn't smooth, all right? So the surface area of your glass alone is actually massive in relation to them. You get a lot just on your glass. Glass is not the best example because every time you do a water change, if you take too long to fill that tank back up, the bacteria that was exposed to oxygen is dead. So yeah, just be aware of that. Every time you drop the water, if you take too long to fill it back up, you're losing bacteria. It's not going to make a massive difference because they can react quickly, and you shouldn't be massively overfeeding your tank. So you're going to be good unless you make too many drastic changes. But that's something for other videos. Let's not get bogged down. The difference between these is this has a hole through the middle. So whereas this one can get clogged here, with this little pore there, this one may not. And even if it does, it's got a center hole here where the water can still go through and access all of these pores. So, and yeah, people will start going on like the biohome Geordie will go on about anaerobic bacteria. Just ignore that. Just ignore that, right? Yeah. I'm not getting into that today, but that is biological filtration. So let's have a closer look. This today is going to play the part of one of these. Okay, it's fundamentally the same. Hole's a little bit smaller, but it's got very, very small pores in it. Well, of course, it won't focus. It's an iPhone. Don't ever buy an iPhone. The cameras are worse than they used to be on the iPhone 10. Promise you. So that's in your filter, right? Awesome. Playing the part of massive, dubious piece of debris is one of our catappa leaves that we also sell at events. And all it takes is that. This would eventually, if you have enough flow going through the filter and it is a soft enough organic material, it will break away. But when there's enough of it, because these are always just crammed in together, there's very little flow that actually happens between these. So the debris sort of gets held together. There's no flow getting to any of those pores, is there? No. So I have ceramic media because it comes with filters and I use it, but in the modification of the Hang On Back 500 from All Pond Solutions, there will be no ceramic media in that. None at all. It is purely going to be sponge. Sponge because it offers a large surface area, and it really does, but very little flow when I'm using 25 or 15 ppm. Very little flow restriction. So I'm getting the most amount of turnover that the pump can provide with the least amount of restriction. So a higher turnover per hour, per day of water volume being filtered in the tank. And that's my thing. I am, as the years go on, year after year after year, I become more just sponge. Not necessarily sponge filters. There's a sponge filter in damn near every tank in this place. But ceramic media just doesn't seem to have a place anymore. There is a tank here which I call the tank of impossibility, because if I put it on the internet would lose their mind, and I would have Peter, Defra, whatever being called about this tank. And the fact is, people can't cope with the truth. Every surface is creating a home for your nitrifying bacteria. And I know I'm going on about this. Maybe I'll even show you the tank one day. Well, I will have to, because a lot of the fish are moving out soon. But in that tank, there are a lot of fish. It's like a 110 litre tank, something like that. And there are over 100 fish in that tank. Fish and shrimp. And they're not small fish. There's Scleromystax barbatus in there. That's a 10 centimetre cory. There's 2 adult bristlenose geckos and probably 30 juveniles of varying sizes. There are guppies. There are L10A whiptails. There's cherry barbs. And they've all bred to that level. They weren't put in there. I haven't done that to them. They have bred to that level and stopped breeding. They have now reached critical mass. Oh, there's probably about 1,000 Hillstream Moses too. But the point is that until we put the All-Pond solution on, that was run by one sponge filter. One that runs 2 of those sponges that I have immediately lost on unhanding. Of course that's happened. Yes, these. 2 of these. And a very weak and old Tetra APS 300 run that tank. So you don't need massive filtration, because effectively that's being run on 2 air stones. 300 litres of air is being pumped into that tank an hour, and that's running that tank. So anyway, I digress. This is getting long, but this is filtration, and unfortunately it has to be long. So yeah, Seachem around 700 square meters per 2 litres. Now, sand is always measured in weight, and 2 kilograms, which is obviously far heavier, but it's a denser product, has around 100 square meters of surface area. So based on that, Seachem sounds a lot more efficient, doesn't it? But under microscopic viewing, sand is relatively smooth. Okay, so if you have a look at like wired.com, and it will show you what sand looks like under a microscope. But it's fairly smooth. Whereas these Seachem matrix type products, it's all the pores, and then all the pores on the inside, remember. And there's no way of knowing how much of the pores on the inside that have no access to the outside that they're calculating. I don't think there's much difference in it, personally. I really don't. So how many kilograms of sand have you got in the top 1 centimetre of your substrate? 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so just your sand substrate, let's take it badly. That's 4. If you've got 14 kilos, that's equivalent to 2 litres of Seachem matrix. Nobody runs 2 litres of Seachem matrix. So if you've got 7 kilos in the top 1 centimetre, that's the same as a litre of Seachem matrix. Okay, but don't forget all the other decor, all your plant surfaces, all the wood. How porous is your wood? That's running the same sort of principle as the Seachem matrix. How many litres of wood have you got in there? Likely a lot more than you have Seachem matrix. Or the glass, your heater, the filter, the air stone, the airline, everything. So you probably don't need to worry about biological filtration. In fact, I know you don't. You can run a 240 litre fluval Roma tank on one decent sponge filter. That's a fact. Oh, it depends on the density of your stocking. Does it? Does it? If you add them all too quickly to a system that's not ready for it, yeah, they'll die. But if you added them one cardinal tetra at a time, you could easily put 800 cardinal tetras on one sponge filter. Unless it's a completely empty glass box. Maybe then there's a case. Because you're lacking any decoration inside any substrate that's giving you all the surface area. All right? So just the next time you talk to a cichlid guy, and you'll know he's a cichlid guy because the first thing he'll tell you is how many FX6s he's got. Yeah, they're like Porsche drivers of the fish road. You'll know who they are. You just take it with a pinch of salt, because you do not need kilograms after kilograms after kilograms of any sort of sintered glass or pumice stone. You just don't. Take everything steady. And if you actually reach a point, I was talking to Corey McElroy about this, I've never reached a point where the tank cannot cope. Because that tank of impossibility upstairs with all those fish in just 105, 110 litres of water, it's a pretty well planted tank. There's a lot of moss in there, a lot of Christmas moss, a lot of Anubias. And even though they've got a slow uptake, it never exceeds 40 parts per million of nitrate. And everything else is beautiful. No ammonia, no nitrite, 40 parts per million at the end of 7 days. Just saying. I've never run into a biological filtration issue, no matter what filtration you run. Never happened for me. Never happened for Corey. Can't speak for anybody else. So that leaves us with chemical filtration. This stuff is kind of witchcraft. You put it in, you believe it works. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So Seachem have a resin which will remove organic compounds, but not fertilizer, even though fertilizer can be made of organic compounds. And I've never used it because I've no need for it. So I can't say whether it works or not, but that is what I am. That is what they claim. And some people have said, yeah, I don't test for my fertilizers, so if it's pulling them out, I'm just dosing for no reason because my plants are good. But chemical filtration, it's as simple as activated carbon and as complicated as these resins. Now, it can come in forms like this. This is a phosphate pad. So this is basically a bit of naff sponge with some sort of resin impregnated onto it, that it absorbs a certain amount of phosphate. This is an example of a carbon tea bag. You can buy loose carbon, you can buy it like this. You see the stuff in there. The problem with chemical filtration, for me, is that you don't know when it's expired. You don't know when it cannot absorb any more until your levels are elevated. Now, if it's ammonia, because there are chemical filtration options that absorb ammonia, that's going to be a problem. And I recently saw some Geordie guy, the biohome doesn't work, ultimate guy, and it was probably an old video because, let's face it, he's old. But he was suggesting that you can use these ammonia absorbing resin pads when you're starting up a tank, and there could not be a worse option. Why would you do this? So his argument is, it will control the ammonia while you cycle the tank. Yeah, it will. But how much ammonia is it taking out, Chief? You don't know, do you? No, you don't. So imagine this is your filter. It's cross section. We're looking down. Okay, it's got sponge in it. Okay, that's my drawing of sponge, right? It's abstract, get with it. And then over here, because this little round tea bag that was being shown was never going to fill a canister. It was a little round tea bag. So that is your ammonia absorbing tea bag that we are supposed to be using and recommended by Biohome Ultimate to use during starting up a tank. It's in the cycling process. Now, let's assume that we have 15. Let's go with 15 units of ammonia. And this is what the tank is running at. Week after week, pick your time period, doesn't matter. The sponge and the bacteria on the sponge are taking care of 66.6%. They're dealing with 10 parts of ammonia. This pad is only dealing with a third of it. No, that's going to be for several reasons. It's not taking up the entire surface there, so water is getting past it without going through it. Okay, that could be one reason. Another reason is we're trying to establish bacteria. So maybe we've added some bacteria in a bottle, Sechem stability or Fritzyme 7, whatever. So we do want the sponge to be taking care of some of it. So it's not a bad thing that it's only dealing with 5. In fact, it's a bad thing that it is dealing with 5. Again, in my opinion. Because the first thing you're going to know, I mean, especially if this is in a canister filter, even if there was a visual thing on the tea bag that showed you when it was going to expire, because you need a pre-warning, that doesn't exist, by the way, they don't tell you. But even if it did and it was in a canister filter, you'd have to open it up every day to have a look. You're not doing that. So the first thing you know is when that stops working. That stops working, you get a spike. Because these guys haven't had to deal with that extra 5. So maybe they can only deal with 2. They're multiplying as fast as they can. In the next 24 hours, there's another 5 that can't be dealt with because the tank is under the same bioload. You're feeding the same, you have the same fish, you haven't bought any new fish. It's just that pad has been dealing with it until it can't. So the bacteria, as we discussed in the nitrogen cycle, have not had to grow to that level because the pad has been taking 30% of the load, 33% of the load. So it's only ever had to establish itself to 66% of the load. Now all of a sudden it's not working. So in your second 24 hours, now you've got 8. And then in your third 24 hours, you've got more and more and more. But you're not checking your ammonia because your tank cycles. You know what you're doing. Next thing you know, bubbles won't pop at the surface of your tank. That's a sign of ammonia, by the way. Can also be difference in viscosities, proteins, lipids building up on the surface. They will stop bubbles popping as quickly as they could. Ammonia will do that, and so will medications. So if you haven't used any medications and you don't have the glossy film that protein and lipids leave behind, and your bubbles are still taking a while to pop, check your ammonia level. Top tip. But back to this. This isn't working, or has been removed, or both. It's not working. You've removed it. You've noticed you've got an ammonia spike. But you've got a fully stocked 200-litre tank, say. And by fully stocked, I mean we all overstock a little bit. But your filtration was handling it, so you thought. Now you're just going to get a really, really big ammonia spike, which is either going to result in you changing an awful lot of water all the time, which isn't really going to help because removing too much ammonia is going to stop the bacteria having anything to grow on to a number where they can deal with it. Or you're going to have to deal with it in a detoxifying manner, or really, really quickly go and get another pad. It's just not a good idea to start a system using a resin that absorbs something as important and as detrimental as ammonia. Is it a good idea to have one in your cabinet? Yeah, cool. I don't personally. Nothing wrong with having it in your medicine box, your emergency box, with your emergency battery backup air pump, with your emergency USB air pump. No problem with that. It's better to have it and not need it than this case, need it and not have it. Either start and do it always like that, or don't. Now, other resins, fantastic. Denitrate and things that can deal with removing chemicals. Phosphate, fantastic. If you're having some algae problems that can be attributed to phosphate, brilliant. All for it. Because at the end of the day, the worst thing that can happen is if they expire and you don't have new ones, maybe in a week or 10 days, the algae starts to reappear. It's not the end of the world for your fish. So chemical filtration is wondrous, but also you need to understand its limitations. And you know, Purigen can be regenerated. So it doesn't have to, not all of them are as expensive as replacing them all the time. Some of them can be regenerated, i.e. cleaned and then reused. Purigen is cleaned in bleach, and then you need a lot of dechlorinator to deal with the bleach. So I think it's sometimes cheaper just to find who's got it on sale, buy new. Not going to do great wonders for your carbon footprint though. So yes, that is filtration. That's all I've got to say. I've probably missed something key, no my luck, but that's what I've got to say on filtration right now. I'm sorry it's long, but filtration is one of the biggest things, and it doesn't really need to be. But don't tell anybody, because they will argue until you cry. But yeah, so why don't we leave the concept of the types of filtration there. I'll see you in the next one. We will look at heaters, I think, before I go down the minefield of different types, or systems is probably a better word, different systems of filtration. So I hope everybody found a reason to smile today. And more than that, I hope everybody found a way to give somebody else a reason to smile. And I'll catch you in the next one.